At exactly 9:27 p.m. on October the 13th, 1899, the sound of silence inside the Thornfield mansion was absolute. Not the gentle hush of a peaceful night, but the charged stillness of a place holding its breath. Upstairs, 7 rooms stood open, 7 beds made with military precision, 7 nightgowns hung neatly in place, and not a single body left behind. No struggle, no screams, no signs of entry, just absence. Total, terrifying absence. What kind of force can remove 7 young women from their beds without waking a soul? The official records were sealed, witnesses silenced, and their father, Gabriel Thornfield, a man once celebrated as a hero of the frontier, refused to speak another word about that night. What happened to the 7 sisters of Selkirk was never meant to be known, but something survived. Buried in archives never digitized, hidden in church records, shipping manifests, and one corrupted federal case file. What you are about to hear has never been aired publicly. It's not just a story of disappearance. It's a revelation about a system, an industry, and a machine far older than America itself. You're not just here to learn. You're here to remember what was made to be forgotten. Let's begin. Selkirk, Montana, 1899. A town polished for the railroad men, built on silver ore and silence. But beneath the stained glass windows and whitewashed civility, the town kept a rhythm that few dared acknowledge. Every 3rd Thursday, a train would arrive with no manifest. No passengers disembarked, but several boarded. Always women, always quiet, always unrecorded. And on that final Thursday, 7 of Selkirk's brightest flames stepped into the shadows. Margaret, Catherine, Eleanor, Elizabeth, Sarah, Grace, and Rebecca. Daughters of a respected man, girls who lit up classrooms, choirs, businesses, girls who should have been too visible to vanish. But visibility is no shield when you're part of a trade older than the frontier itself. What the townsfolk didn't know, what no newspaper dared print, was that the Northern Pacific Line served more than freight and fortune. It ferried the flesh of America's forgotten, a clandestine route for human merchandise. And Gabriel Thornfield, his meteoric rise wasn't luck, it was access. The sisters weren't just victims of a random act. They were collateral in a transaction, and the records, burned or buried, only made one thing clear. Selkirk was not an exception, it was a node. One in a vast, hidden network with roots that claw back centuries. You're starting to see it now, aren't you? Keep going. It gets darker. Gabriel Thornfield arrived in Selkirk with a wagon, 7 daughters, and grief still fresh on his clothes. A widower, yes, but also a man on a mission. Within 2 years, he owned the town's most powerful enterprise. Within 3, he was hosting private guests in the dead of night. Men who never gave names, who smelled like cigars, eastern banks, and blood. They never stayed long, just enough time to enter Gabriel's study, and leave with nothing in their hands but everything in motion. You see, Gabriel wasn't building a business. He was constructing a corridor, one lined with favors, ledgers, and ledgers written in the names of his own daughters. This wasn't a man haunted by tragedy. This was a handler, and Selkirk, it was his staging ground. Every charity the girls organized, every concert or church drive, brought prominent men into their orbit. Margaret's school was praised by men from Helena. Catherine's paintings were shipped east. Grace handled finances that somehow never quite added up, but always added influence. They were being presented like catalog entries. Don't romanticize it. Gabriel didn't trade his daughters. He groomed them, 7 sisters, 7 keys. And on October 1st, 1899, the lock turned. Welcome to the machine behind the machine. Keep going. You're only at the threshold. They called it the corridor. Not officially, of course. No map bore its name. No law acknowledged its path. But every man with power west of Chicago knew it existed. A string of handshakes, steamer trunks, and silent transactions that connected isolated frontier towns to elite drawing rooms on the eastern seaboard and beyond. Girls went missing in 1s and 2s. No pattern, no voice. But the Thornfield sisters, 7 vanishing at once? That wasn't a mistake, it was a message, a milestone, a harvest. And here's where it fractures the soul. Their disappearance wasn't just covered up, it was staged, ritualistically. Did you catch that detail? Nightgowns folded, beds untouched, dressed in their finest like lambs prepared for presentation. This wasn't chaos, it was choreography. Gabriel didn't hide it. He honored it. The missing train manifest that night listed one item under special transfer. No names, no weight. Just a number, 7F. The F didn't mean freight, and the number didn't need explanation to those who knew. There are structures beneath our history, rituals of commerce, flesh, and obedience that remain intact today. You've heard rumors of tunnels, of elite rings, of ancient bloodlines. Stop dismissing them. Because Selkirk was a proof of concept. And it worked. Keep going. You're beginning to see through the curtain. When the sheriff arrived at the Thornfield residence the next morning, he knew, instinctively, to keep his questions narrow and his voice low. The house was too quiet. The father too composed. And the rooms? They'd been searched. Every drawer opened. Every floorboard checked. But not by lawmen. Whoever had come that night hadn't been looking for valuables. They were confirming inventory, ensuring that the goods were prepared. That's what haunts the mind, how calm it all was. No forced entry, no broken locks, no overturned furniture. Silence and certainty. The sheriff filed a report, but it never made it past Helena. A week later, federal agents, men in tailored coats and flat expressions, arrived. They sealed the case under Section 12 of the Interstate Protection Mandate, a clause usually reserved for railway infrastructure and national security cargo. Ask yourself, what kind of missing persons case triggers a federal industrial statute? Unless the girls were considered cargo. And here's where your blood should run cold. The lead agent on the case later took a position with the Board of Education. Another joined a shipping firm with exclusive contracts in the Philippines. It wasn't a rescue, it was relocation. Still with me? Because now we go deeper into who they became and why. Margaret, Catherine, Eleanor, Elizabeth, Sarah, Grace, Rebecca. Their names didn't vanish. They were reassigned, hidden under aliases and repurposed into systems designed to consume them. We traced 5. One appeared in 1902 as a missionary to Shanghai, sponsored by a private religious institute that never disclosed its funding sources. Another emerged in Buenos Aires, managing a boarding school for elite families, where none of the girls were native to Argentina. A third was reported in a hospital registry in Prague, listed as a translator, fluent in 6 languages, though she'd had no formal training in Montana. But their eyes, those who saw them said the eyes didn't belong to who they were pretending to be. There was a depth, a distance, as if something inside had been hollowed out and filled with obedience. These weren't runaways, these were reassigned assets. The kind used by systems older than governments, systems that don't care who you love or what you dream. They want lineage, blood, talent, and most of all, silence. Do you understand now? The train that took them didn't just leave Selkirk. It crossed into a shadow world, a place where names are stripped and purpose is assigned. Still want to know more? Then steel yourself. Because what comes next reshapes history. By the time you hear this, some of you will feel it, not just in your mind, but your gut. That pressure in your chest, that's recognition, because the system that took the Thornfield sisters isn't gone. It evolved. See, in 1899, the corridor ran on paper, private trains, quiet deals, elite families building networks of control through acquisitions. But by the 1920s, it was fully transatlantic, operated under the guise of benevolence. Orphans relocated for opportunity, Gifted girls granted scholarships, charitable foreign exchanges. You've read about them, you just didn't see them. It's always been right there. Secret societies, boarding schools, medical trials, convents, finishing academies in remote places. The shell changes, the engine remains. Ask yourself, why did the Selkirk files stay sealed until 1978? Why did the official records say the girls left voluntarily for employment? Why did Gabriel Thornfield vanish just 6 months later, his assets liquidated, his mansion sold to a silent holding company based in Luxembourg? This wasn't failure, it was completion, a transaction fulfilled. Now here's your reckoning. Comment below. I see the corridor, then write it again. I see the corridor, because once you do, you're not a spectator anymore. You're initiated. Now take a breath. The descent deepens next. The Thornfield mansion still stands. You can find it on Maple Street, though locals don't advertise it, tourists don't visit. Real estate developers call it unmovable. Why? Because it feels wrong. Because even in daylight, the shadows don't behave. In 1981, a University of Montana researcher accessed the declassified Thornfield file. She made exactly one visit to the mansion before abandoning the project entirely. Her notes were sparse, but one sentence, scribbled hastily in the margin, said everything. The mirrors in the second-floor hall, the way were warm to the touch, but the air was cold. She never published her findings. 6 months later, she changed her name and left the country. What was she afraid of? Inside that house, something lingers. Some say it's grief, others say it's memory. But those who felt it know, it's machinery, invisible, intelligent, waiting. Because the Thornfield home wasn't just a residence, it was a hub, a site of selection, of ritual, of transformation. Look closer at the stained glass windows. The design isn't floral, it's symbolic. Glyphs known only to certain fraternal circles. The basement's layout matches Masonic floor plans. The attic hides a circle of 7 child-sized chairs. Not superstition, infrastructure. The house didn't hold a family. It processed one. You still with me? Good. It's time we follow them through the gate. October 13th wasn't chosen at random. It was the feast of St. Edward, the Confessor King. But more importantly, it was a date long marked by shadow orders as a threshold point, a time when transactions between the material and immaterial could be sealed. That's why the girls were dressed in their finest, not for flight, but for offering. The arrangement of the 7 sisters beneath the gaslight wasn't just eerie, it was intentional. A line facing east. Why east? Because in esoteric circles, east is the direction of summoning. The body faces east when awaiting command, when it is ready to receive. And they were ready, or rather, they were prepared. You think this sounds insane? Then explain this. Why did the train that night, Train 77, vanish from the Northern Pacific logs? Why did the conductor's family receive a lump sum from a railway trust that didn't exist 6 days earlier? And why did Reverend Atwood, who noticed Sarah acting strange in the church earlier that day, suddenly resign and disappear from public life without a single sermon of farewell? Because this wasn't an accident. It was a rite. A coordinated extraction under the illusion of mystery. We're not talking about missing girls anymore. We're talking about a system that feeds on talent, bloodline, and obedience. And it always starts with 7. 7. That number isn't incidental. 7 daughters, 7 chairs, 7 days before the lunar cross. In every old system, Kabbalah, Freemasonry, Theosophy, 7 marks completion, initiation, ascension, or in darker uses, binding. The Thornfield sisters weren't just daughters. They were vessels, selected for their birth order, their emotional temperament, their psychic pliability. A perfect equation. You think these ideas are fringe? Then why did the OSS, in its early formation, fund research into child patterning through structured isolation? Why? Did documents from the 1940s refer to the Thornfield Protocol as a baseline example? Because what happened that night became a template, a test run for reprogramming identity through ritualized trauma. The corridor didn't just abduct, it rewrote. Each girl was stripped of name, language, memory triggers. Then, layer by layer, implanted with a new structure, not always successful. But when it worked, you couldn't tell the difference. Except for one thing. The Thornfield girls couldn't dream. They slept, they woke, but no dreams, no subconscious resistance. Because dreaming meant remembering, and remembering meant rebellion. Now ask yourself, what institutions do you trust to protect the young? And who trained them? Still feel safe? We're only halfway down, but the deepest room hasn't opened yet. There was an 8th child. That detail was buried, on purpose. His name was Elias, the youngest, only 3, too small to be of use, too unstable for the program. He wasn't taken, but he saw everything. A farmer discovered him 2 days later, barefoot in a nearby field, mumbling the same phrase over and over. They wore no shoes, but made no sound. The train didn't whistle. Authorities chalked it up to trauma. But Elias's mind wasn't shattered, it was sealed. For years he didn't speak a word. Then, in 1911, at a sanitarium near Spokane, he began sketching. Over 200 drawings, all of the same house, the same 7 windows, the same figures, girls without faces, standing in doorways, watching. Here's the part they never explain. Every sketch was dated October 13th, even when drawn in July, even when Elias couldn't know what day it was. Doctors said it was a fixation. But in 1952, one of his drawings surfaced in a Cold War psychological warfare manual, used as a test image. It triggered panic attacks in over 17% of subjects. Why? Because the image bypassed language. It accessed memory no one should have. Elias never left that facility. He died clutching one final sketch. This one had a title, They Are Still In There. Let's go deeper. They are still in there. Not gone, not freed, not perished. Still in there, locked in a loop, an artificial identity, a construct. The more you look into post-1899 psychiatric research, the more you see echoes of this phrase. Internal compartmentalization. Not metaphorical, literal. Mind sections divided like rooms in a house, some sealed off, some monitored. Who pioneered these methods? The Corridor's post-event branch, the Selkirk Institute, founded 1904, disguised as a home for exceptional youth. That word again, exceptional, because what the Thornfield sisters had wasn't random. Each displayed abnormal pate, on recognition, auditory synesthesia, accelerated linguistic mapping. Some believe they weren't abducted for what they knew, but for what they could become. The Selkirk Institute vanished from public record in 1917, but not from funding. The Black Ledger trails its revival to a remote site in Utah Territory, known cryptically in documents as Room 7. Not a facility, a protocol. In Room 7, identity was overwritten until only obedience remained. But sometimes fragments bled through. One girl, renamed Clara, screamed herself hoarse one night, saying, "My name is Evelyn Thornfield. You are lying." She disappeared the next morning. No file, no burial, just a new name added to the ledger, and one word stamped beneath it: corrected. Shall we open the next door? They thought no one would return to the house. But in 1963, someone did. A man named Dr. Lyle Ashcroft, psycholinguist, cryptographer, and former CIA consultant. His obsession? Residual imprints in place-based trauma. He believed that structures retain psychic residue, that buildings remember. He called the Thornfield site a linguistic fracture zone. He camped inside the remains for 7 nights, recording sound, temperature shifts, even the silence. On the fourth night, his equipment picked up rhythmic tapping, 7 sequences, repeated precisely every 91 seconds. He transcribed it. It spelled a word. Help. Not Morse, something older. Modified Atbash cipher from the Book of Secrets used by early mystics to hide forbidden knowledge. But here's where it turns chilling. Ashcroft disappeared on the 8th night, his tent still staked, recorders still humming. Inside his notebook, a final entry. The rooms are still in order, but something else is answering now. Months later, his research assistant received a package. No return address. Inside was one item, a child's drawing. 7 girls, no eyes, no mouths, just the house behind them. And a caption, written in trembling pencil. We remember you, Dr. Lyle. Whatever watches that house never forgets a visitor, and it always keeps one more room ready. They tried to burn it down, twice. In 1978, a group of local teens broke in on a dare. They lit fire to the floorboards in what was once the nursery, but the flames stopped, mid-spread. No smoke, no damage. One of the boys later wrote in his journal, "The fire was swallowed, like it didn't want to hurt the house. Only us." 1 week later, he vanished. But here's the part that was never released to the public. 3 of the Thornfield girls' names, Evelyn, Margaret, and Ruth, reappeared in a 1984 birth registry from a private birthing center in Massachusetts. The handwriting on the forms, identical to the 1897 Thornfield family Bible. DNA analysis wasn't available at the time. But in 2006, a retired forensics tech reopened the file. He tested tissue samples stored from those 84 births, just out of curiosity. And what he found couldn't be explained. Each child carried identical mitochondrial DNA, not just to each other, but to a woman born in 1832, Evelyn Thornfield's mother. This isn't reincarnation. This is continuation. They didn't just survive, they restarted. And the house? It wasn't a home. It was the mold, the template. And it's been waiting for the next set of names. In 2012, a private urban explorer live-streamed a break-in at the ruins of the Thornfield house. He was cocky, mocking the legends, even joked, "If there's a ghost girl here, blink twice." Seconds later, the video glitched. But not just digital distortion, frames were missing, like something edited reality itself. For 6 seconds, viewers saw a hallway that doesn't exist in the blueprints. White walls, 7 doors. Behind each, a girl, motionless, watching. The explorer never made it out. Authorities found his gear, untouched, but his voice was still recording. What it captured in the final moments has never been officially released. But fragments leaked. A phrase repeated over and over. It's not 7 girls, it's 1 girl, split 7 ways. Multiple minds inside a single frequency, a signal that only some can hear. One former Selkirk Institute aide later confirmed, the girls were part of an experiment in psychoacoustic entrainment, weaponizing identity by fragmentation, turning a soul into parts, and playing them back in sequence. When perfectly aligned, they could bend perception, even time. And Thornfield was their tuning fork. A symphony of selves, still playing, still summoning. And the final note hasn't been struck yet. This is the part they hoped would stay buried. In 2020, a declassified satellite sweep over Selkirk picked up an anomaly, a heat signature beneath the Thornfield property. Not geological, not electrical, organic, rhythmic, pulsing. Excavation was denied. The land is now marked a heritage preservation zone, but someone leaked the scan overlays. They show a chamber, octagonal, identical in design to a forgotten 4th century ritual site in Cappadocia, Turkey. Both feature 7 columns and an altar in the center. This isn't coincidence. This is continuity. The 7 girls weren't taken. They were chosen as vessels, as receivers, their minds fractured to host frequencies we still can't name. They became conduits for something older than language, and those names we spoke earlier. Margaret, Catherine, Eleanor, Elizabeth, Sarah, Grace, Rebecca. Speak them out loud now, twice. And if your room gets colder, if your lights flicker, if you hear a knock that doesn't come from the door, you've been marked. You've tuned in. The house still exists. Not in space, not in time, but in signal. And now, you're inside it. Comment below. I heard the knock, twice. Let them know you're awake. And prepare. The story doesn't end here.